Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Joe Stokowski. Coach Stokowski is a special teams coordinator and director of sports science at Grayson High School. He is also a 2012 graduate of Illinois State University, where he also coached as an undergraduate assistant and defensive intern. Stokowski spent the next 3 seasons at Farmington Central High School, 1 as an assistant and 2 as defensive coordinator. He served as the head coach for both football and boys track and field at Villa Grove High School, a tenure that included a 2017 2A playoff appearance. Coach Stokowski moved to Pepperell High School before landing at the perennial powerhouse Grayson. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So this past week, I listened to a lot of your stuff. You did one with Ross Garner and you did one with John Mark Raspberry, and both were just incredible interviews with great people. So the one thing I learned from listening to those and in the most respectful way possible, I think I might have a little bit in common with you, but is you're really into numbers. You're kind of a nerd.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I wear that badge with pride.
I thought maybe you did, but you're always got to be careful when you call somebody that, but it seems like you've learned to embrace it and really carry some metrics that most people wouldn't even look at.
Yeah. I would say this is going to sound funny, but I'm actually not very savvy when it comes to math. But when I was in college, my friend and I, we ran a Missouri Valley men's basketball fantasy league, and he showed me the ins and outs of Excel, and he was a accounting major himself, and so that's kind of where a lot of that knowledge came from. It wasn't from necessarily being a math whiz or knowing too much. Just kind of lucked into some of that.
Reading between the lines a little bit, maybe, and I could be off, but it seems like you've worked with enough college coaches and been at the college level that you know what they're looking at. So when you start building some of these metrics, you have essentially a handout that you can give to college players on some of your players to give them a really good insight into what they may be getting.
One thing about Grayson is we had just about every Power 5 school in our region, plus quite a few outside of our region visit us this winter, and they'll come back for spring ball. And, this year we signed 16 kids, all the way from D1 to JUCO. And, that's kind of a yearly thing. So being able to provide our kids with the best data, provide those coaches coming in with the best data, and also try to give our kids a leg up. If we're able to kind of explain why our kid has a great projection at the next level, maybe the neighboring school doesn't provide that same information, and it can give our kids, it can give us more information about our own players so we can build the best team we can build, but also give those kids the most opportunity they can to be able to advance, because that's a big reason why a lot of kids come to our school and become part of our program is that we take great pride in developing our kids and putting them in the best position possible to play college football.
On top of that, one of the questions I had was, obviously the schools keep coming back and taking your kids. You're putting out something that they like. Well, they have to be successful at that level as well. So how do you prepare a kid, not necessarily physically, but mentally, for what's coming at the next level, that they can succeed at a D1 school, maybe quite a ways away from Georgia? I think more has to go into it than just having them prepared on the field.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out right now to 2 people specifically, Santavius Bryant, who's our head coach. And he's in terms of a guy who's, he's either 29 or 30. And for a guy that old to be as good as he is, it's just a joy and a pleasure of mine to get to work for him and with him on a daily basis. Aaron Hill, who is our strength coordinator, him and I, it was funny, the Glazier Clinic in Atlanta is coming up tomorrow, and him and I actually met for the first time last year at that clinic. We both knew we were going to be working together, and we knew of each other, but we'd never met before. And we're both that have very unique personalities, and a lot of people wondered, would we get along? And he's actually turned into, the guy I lean on at work, and we're able to really look at it from a inputs, outputs. Aaron definitely, he asked for my advice on things, but really it's his baby, the inputs, and I'm looking at kind of the outputs. What are we getting out of what we're doing? Are we seeing progress? Like we don't want to add strength if it's going to cost us explosion in athleticism. And so we have so many markers in our process that really allows us to work off of each other and do the best that we can for our athletes. With that being said, if you come to Grayson High School, we do truly believe that we prepare our kids for college football at as high of a level as we possibly can. To be on our team is not an easy thing to do. Our academics at our school are going to prepare a kid for college. And then everything that goes into that process is something great pride in. And it's not for the lighthearted, I'll be honest. And that's one thing that I've had to raise my game being there, just because expectations are so high. But it is something that we take a lot of pride in. And, we say every day we're trying to be the best program in the United States of America. And we're taking every step that we can to make sure that happens.
You said something in there, and that was a question I had, is you're at a point where you have a lot of athletes putting all of their hopes and dreams in your ability to help them reach the next level. Understanding that role, embracing that role, and like you said, bringing your best every day to help them attain lifelong dreams. I mean, that's not for the lighthearted, like you said. So how do you stay up, stay motivated, keep going, keep pushing?
I would say that our kids give us so much energy that it's easy to give it back to them, if that makes sense. I've been at places before where I need my guys to match my energy. Like I need them to give me back what I'm giving them. And sometimes that's pulling teeth. Sometimes that's something that has to be learned. Our kids really attack that in a way that I haven't been around since I was, at the college level a decade ago. And so I would say from that aspect, like it's very easy to, if somebody's giving you positive energy, it's really easy to give back to them. I would also say that my job isn't to make them feel good about themselves. My job is to identify the deficiencies, whether it be, we have one of the top linebackers in the country in the class of 2026. And there's things about him that we're identifying is things that we can improve to reduce injury, things that we can improve to, things that we could do to improve speed. And so like working collaboratively with those athletes and having a plan for them. It's fun seeing even a kid that is, even some of these kids that we have there, they are some of the top players in the country. Can we squeeze even more out, right? Can we get them a little bit faster? Can they move a little bit better in the weight room? Can they absorb force better? And so that's honestly, that's what makes my job, the energy of my job so easy on a daily basis is getting to work with those guys.
Now, in everything you said there, we're talking about the great side of it, but where you are, football is very much a business. I know it's a business everywhere, but where you are, football is a business and a business mindset. You've got to make hard decisions and you've got to break bad news to kids that have given you everything they've gotten. Managing that side of it and keeping it all in perspective and still looking out for the best benefits of the kids. How do you do that?
I think what comes to mind for me there is, being the special teams coordinator, I'm really looking for those guys to have put in the sweat equity. They've given that investment. So like for me, a tie is going to go to a senior who's given everything he has to that program. He may be a second string guy on defense, but I kind of know that kid is going to give me everything he has because it means so much to him because of what he's put into it and everything that's come before him and everything that's expected to come after them and being part of that tradition. That is something that we want to we want it to be a fulfilling experience for every kid on our roster. And listen, there are guys on our roster that we know will not ever contribute in a significant way. But can we still provide them in an environment that they can feel like they're seeing personal growth, right? So that's a big aspect of it is not as much as we got all these kids and all, on any given year, like 5 to 10 of them will go D1 and it takes a village. It takes 80 of us if we want to win a state championship. Now, you said about the hopes and dreams. I think some of it too is explaining to parents and explaining to kids, you might be on the other side of puberty. You may not get a ton taller or what. So how can you maximize you as a player, but understand that your max may not be Division 1, but could it be Division 2? And you know, you get a 75% scholarship, and because your grades were good, you can get the other half covered, and you can almost get it fully covered with Pell money. Like being able to put those kids in that position, that we almost take more, I would say more pride, but we almost take as much pride in that as we do as anything, because every single time that happens, it's an opportunity for a kid to better themselves and better the situation. And but just having, I think in a big way, part of why I was hired is to have honest conversations with people about the objective side of recruiting and athletic development. They always make the joke about, like, if you go to a barber and ask him if you need a haircut, he's always going to say yes. And I'm not at all knocking the private sector people, but if you go to them, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to measure you 2 inches taller. They're going to measure you probably a little bit faster than you actually are, because they want you to come back, because they want you to feel good. And a lot of times they're being fed things that are not necessarily helping them identify their deficiencies and the things that we need to focus most on for that kid to improve. It's just human nature. Usually the things that make us feel good will not drive us to change. And for a lot of our kids, it's important that they develop and that they change, and not rest. We tell them all the time, nobody cares about 8th grade football. Like, some of our kids play on some elite teams, and nobody cares about that if you don't do it on a Friday night and you don't turn that into an opportunity for yourself. So.
Now, you were talking about some smaller schools in there, Division 2, Division 3 for your really smart kids that could take academics in, JUCO even. I did have a question kind of relating to that. The D1 level is getting harder to break into with the transfer portal. So getting kids to understand that with the transfer portal, it's knocked down the availability that these guys want to give scholarships to high school kids. I've heard Dion and stuff like that talk about that. So preparing kids and getting them to understand that if you want to play football at the next level, find a spot where you're comfortable and go play there.
We're not ever telling our kids to be dishonest or, disingenuous, but we do tell them, if you believe that you're this, like in your heart of heart, you believe you're a Division 1 prospect, right? And you don't have those opportunities, by all means, take the best thing you get, go to Division 2, be good for that place, go be an All-American. And that's going to provide opportunities that you may have on the backside. Because what's going on now is, the thing with the transfer portal is they'll also bring in a kid over another kid that they recruited as a high school kid. So now that kid's getting flushed to a different part. He's getting flushed into the portal, doesn't necessarily want to be there. So there's so much shuffle that goes along. We can sit here all day and talk about loyalty and being in a place for 4 years. The real truth is that college coaches aren't as loyal as they used to be. They move around more than they ever have. At the end of the day, we have to do the best for our athletes, and we have to advocate for our best situation. That doesn't mean that we're not a great team player. That doesn't mean that we don't buy into the culture of where we're at. But it also, if you have a chance to parlay that into a larger scholarship or an NIL opportunity, in this day and age, it'd be foolish not to approach things in that way.
Yeah, and that's one of those things with as many coaches as you guys have come through. You can stay up on what's going on. A smaller school who may not have those connections with the coaches, they're playing catch up. So building credibility with college coaches, finding out what they want, what's going on, kind of being in that loop has to help tremendously.
Yeah, and I will say this. I've been on the other side of things where you're begging coaches to come through your place. You're begging them to look. When I tell you that some of our best players had a nightmare in recruiting this offseason, like, don't think that things are all rosy where we're at either. I mean, kids that very clearly would have been FCS or Division 1 prospects are now Division 2 prospects. And we flip on the film and the film's great, but I need a guy. Like, we had people coming in, and we had a receiver who was a very good player, first 1,000-yard receiver in Grayson history. and they'd come in, hey, we're looking for a guy out of the portal. And we said, well, you're probably looking for what, a big, fast, strong receiver, right? That's played against good competition. They're like, yeah. I go, well, I'm going to be honest with you. We played Parkview High School, and they've got 2 5-stars in their defensive backfield. They've got more talent than any school. Their high school's got more talent than any school you're playing in your group of 5. Now, obviously not as developed, not as old, but we tell people all the time, flip on the tape. The kid's 190 pounds. He can hit 21.5 miles an hour on GPS. He has 1,000 yards receiving at one of the premier schools in the state of Georgia. And we're having trouble getting that kid. So when I say that this transfer portal has stretched all the way to every corner of high school football, it really has. And so it's so important now for high schools and high school coaches and kids and parents to know how to navigate, how to maneuver, and how to advocate so they can put themselves in the best position to be successful.
And I believe it was Garner's podcast that you kind of touched on this for a second, but it's worth bringing back up. The amount of stress these kids are under during the recruiting process, it's very taxing on everything, and every game has to be their best game, and everything they do to prepare for the college they want. It really wears them down, I'm sure. So you have to find a way to work around that.
Yeah, I was talking to a parent today of a kid who is going to have a lot of opportunity to play, Power 5 football, and he's saying, I'm getting all this mail, getting all these emails about one-day camps, and we're telling him, we're like, listen, if it's a place he really likes, or he really wants to get to know the campus or get to know the coaches better, there's nothing wrong with going. But I said, if you went to every school that invited you to a camp, I said, you got to understand there's 2 things that they're trying to accomplish with these camps. One of them is get eyes on kids that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get eyes on. The other thing is to make a little supplemental money in the summer. So, and I've told people this before, I've worked at schools where I got like 8 invitations to a D1 school to go to a camp, and we did not have anybody close to being D1 level. But they'll take your $60, they'll give you a white T-shirt that costs them $4 to print on, and so that you always want to be the hustler. You never want to get hustled, and it's really easy to get hustled in the recruiting game. So just being able to have those conversations, like I was saying, well, the coach came in and met him in December. The coach has every intention of coming back to watch him during the spring. Is there really a need for you to travel across the country? Right now, if it's one of your top 5, or it's a place that you want to take an official visit, or whatever that might be, that's great. But that process is a double-edged sword. Now, I will say this: the tough thing, and this is where we have to do a good job communicating with the college coaches, is that when I was at Illinois State, and this was a decade ago, but we would have situations where one of the reasons we wanted to wait for the kid to get on campus to offer was because, do I trust that this kid is willing to travel to us? Like, a lot of times it was a kid that lived more, a state that wasn't touching Illinois, right? Do we trust this kid is willing to go 6, 7, 8, 12 hours away from home to play? Or they want to lay eyes on the kid, right? They've seen film, but can you trust things you hear from camps? Can you trust things you hear from coaches? They want to be able, one thing with recruiting, I am 6 foot tall on the dot. And one thing that they always like for me to be in the lobby when the recruit would come in, because they could size the kid up compared to me. And so, like, that's a big part is, okay, like, we just want to get the kid on campus because we want you to be able to see him because we think he can play for you. That's a different situation than you already offered the kid. You're sending him a letter every week. Like, that mail he got from some recruiting intern that is not the coach that's actually recruiting him. Like, you don't necessarily need to make that trip and pay that money, because you have that relationship that you need to build to get recruited. So yeah, like I said, for every kid, it's a little bit different. And like I said, every kid is a little bit different, and just trying to be able to help our kids navigate that is something that, we're trying to get better at every year. We're trying to learn more about how we want to, because the landscape is shifting and shaking. And the thing is that these college coaches don't necessarily know what's going on. Right. Greg Sankey put something out today about, do they want to move the early signing period up even further? Right. And so now that would shift the whole calendar. And So what I'm saying is that we feel like we're in the middle of an earthquake, but what we don't always recognize is those college coaches are in the same boat. They're in the same earthquake as we are. Just they're trying to do the best they can to keep their job.
Now, most guys, they're not going to have classes like you that go off to college, but there are bits and pieces in there that they can take to help their, whatever they have getting ready to play at the next level. You coached at a low level as far as size.
Yeah.
To the Mecca. Now, what about recruiting could you take back to those smaller schools that would help some of those athletes?
Yeah, so we do so much tracking now of size data, speed data, that I think I could have done a better job then of um, maybe identifying kids that had good film but great potential. Right? I didn't maybe recognize what that great potential would look like. I have a kid in mind who ended up going playing D3 football and had a really good career, but he was every bit of 6'4", 6'5", and you know who could I have reached out to? Who could I, could he have been a successful player at the Division II level or at the SCS level? Um, the other thing too is a lot of that is regional. A lot of that is regional. So like in Illinois is not um, it's not a D2 state. There's just not a lot of D2 football. There's a ton of D3s, where neighboring Missouri is a completely different landscape, right? Missouri is D2, like the D2 Mecca, right? And then you go down, you have places like, people are watching Last Chance U and they see, Mississippi. Well, Mississippi's littered with JUCO. So is Iowa, so is Kansas. So some of these, like every state kind of has its own culture. One thing that really benefits us is like, I'll be frank, like there's not a lot of white people in our program. I'm one of the few. And so we have a lot of HBCUs, specifically Division II HBCUs here in Georgia, in neighboring states. So our athletes have a really great opportunity to go to a lot of those schools where, if you're a minority athlete who lives in a state where that's not as prevalent, that kid maybe not be able to be seen. So yeah, like, and when you said small, like I think that people maybe don't recognize how small. So I was at a school with 180 students. We were in a co-op with another school to have a football program. They had about 170 students. So I was the only football coach as a teacher in the building. Everybody else was a community coach. Um, and so that is such an, you have D3 schools come in, but you don't have the same people come in. So what we tried to always do is take our kids to, as a team, we went to team camp at Illinois College. We went to a 7-on-7 at Illinois State. And one of our kids, if a kid balls out and some coach, he catches the eye of somebody, maybe that's going to create that connection. But yeah, like I said, being able to maybe help the coach, I understand far more about who an athlete could become now than what I did 7 years ago. And I would say that would be my biggest thing that I would take back to that.
Where I am in Missouri, you see a lot of co-ops. You see a lot of 8-man just trying to keep football alive. And then what I thought about that when I was listening to you and a lot of what you track, and you start looking at, maybe some catapult data or GPS data where how much your guys are taking in during practice during the week and then also game night. Personally, I think, obviously small schools don't have the money that some of the bigger schools do, but it might be more important at that level, even so than at your level, because I'm sure when you were coaching, you had kids that never come off the field. How much volume are they getting?
Absolutely. So conditioning is highly overrated. When you talk about like a kid may play 70 snaps in the night for us, and that may seem like, man, he played a lot of snaps, like D-line snaps. I would have kids that would play 100. Like they would play literally every snap that they could play. They were the starting receiver, they were the starting DB, and if they weren't the gunner on punt, we would never tackle anybody, right? And if they weren't the returner on kickoff, then we'd never get it past the 20. Like those kids had to stay out there. I will say, I don't know if you've interviewed him before, but Dan Mullins is a coach here in Georgia, and the schools he has been at, they've had a lot of success, but he's had guys that have gone both ways. And his catapult data, and now Titan data, like his workloads will be far higher than what my kids have on a Friday, because we don't have kids going both We two platoon. It's what we're doing at Grayson is closer. The game on the field is closer to college football than it is to what I was coaching in Illinois. So yeah, I think some of those GPS load things. I will say this. I do think there are corners of the world that um, overtrain their kids. I remember uh, who was it? Matt Van Dyke, who I believe works for the Texans now. He got hired by oh shoot, he's the coach down at FAU, but he was the Tom Herman at Texas. And they were trying to figure out, they were having good seasons. They couldn't beat Maryland in the first game. There was like back-to-back years where they lost to Maryland, and they were trying to figure out why. And what they were finding is like the workload they put on the kids during fall camp, they were still had a hangover come week one. And so, I think there's a lot of like preparing kids for um, uh, when I say over preparing, I don't mean that in an ugly way. Is it just to say, like, are we getting the kid to the game at their best, in their best possible um, version of themselves? And I think sometimes that we try really hard to hit the mark, but we don't know where the mark is, and that's where I think GPS and things along those lines can really help us. Um, but I will say this, like, I don't think. Uh, if you told me, hey, I'm going to take your GPS or I'm going to take your dasher lasers or your free lab, what would you take? You could have my GPS. You know what I mean? Like I can get far more data on our kids' CNS and just how they're feeling and going into a game. Just having them run one full speed sprint a week. Um, you can get kind of lost in the weeds with some of the GPS stuff. Um, but yeah, we try to use every data point we can to put our kids in the best position.
Now, you threw a lot of stuff out there, so I'll try to work through it here. First of all, shout out to Coach Mullins because he has been on the show and we'll text back and forth and we'll argue about some stuff, and he's been great. So, yes, and I know he keeps up on a lot of that stuff. Second thing was you start talking about timers. You start getting into small schools and you can pull that off with timers and get a reasonably priced timer and have the information there you want. That may be an answer to some of these guys' problems. Or
can I give a cheaper answer?
Yeah.
So it used to be a free answer. It used to be, you remember the Coach's Eye app, which is no longer supported. If you have an old phone and it's still on there, it still runs. You can't download it on a new phone. So when I was at Pepperell High School, it wasn't that I had a free lap, but I wasn't provided the time. I was teaching English all day, so I didn't have time. So what we did is we actually like filmed kids run a fly. Film kids run a fly, and they would just run like one after another, after another, after another, after another. And after practice was over, I would go and look at the film, and I would put like cones. Okay, when did they run through the first cone? Start the online stopwatch or the on-screen stopwatch, and then they ran to the last cone. Boom, what was that time? Convert that to a mile per hour. So we were pulling off data that way. I obviously Coach's Eye isn't out there. I get a Dartfish subscription, which I think is like $80 a year. But if you have the time to go and do that analysis, you're talking $8 a month, and you can get as much speed data as you want, and you're also getting video of your kids running, so you can also go back and show the kid, hey, when we're talking about posture, this is what we're talking about. Because what I find a lot of times is the main key I give kids all the time is tall when they're at top speed. So many kids want to ab run. And what I mean by that is like they're crunched up. And I tell kids all the time, athletic is long and flowy. It's not bound up and tight. And so being able to show a kid a visual of, hey, this is what I'm talking about when I say your arm swing is cross your body versus, being linear. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about posture. Or this is what, when, you tell a kid interior pelvic tilt, that doesn't mean anything to them, right? But when you can show them what that means and they can see themselves do it, that's a massive resource. That's actually what I was doing last year. So when I was at my former school, but was on my way to Grayson last spring, they were just sending me videos the same way that I had done it when I was at Pepperell. The limitation was I personally couldn't be there. But that's a way that you can get speed data on your kids literally tomorrow. And it's as accurate as your phone is frames per second, So yeah, like I said, if there's a will, there's a way when it comes to velocity timing. I do know there's people out there that try to like stopwatch. I I heard about a college that was stopwatching 10-yard flies. I go, that is an act of futility. Like you're not going to get it accurate enough to have meaningful data. But video is a great way to go. Freelab, Dasher, there's all things I own that I've used, and I think as the market gets better, you're going to see prices drop as there's competition. Beautiful country that we live in, right? The more products we got, the more competition. So, but no, if you're not tracking your kid's speed, I think 5 years ago you weren't an early adopter. Now you're falling behind.
I was listening to you with Ross Garner, and you were kind of breaking down your football weeks and talking about, -1 day, -1 day. Wednesday was a little bit more, so maybe you're a +1. But at the end of the week, by the time you hit Friday, you start potentiating again. But by the time you start potentiating, you're still in a negative workload. Now, I'm probably butchering how you said all that, but it made me think. I watched a lot of football this year doing Prepcast, and it's still pretty warm here in Missouri in the beginning part of them seasons. And you get 70 minutes pregame, and you watch a lot of those teams. They use that full 70 minutes like it's a practice. They got kids playing both ways and special teams. I just don't know how you balance that when you got a team like you that you're only playing one way with a lot of kids, and you're evaluating that and trying to knock down your practice stress. That small school really has to think about that.
Absolutely. So a gentleman I worked with, who's still the head coach at Farmington Central, Toby Vallis, he was very, like, today his ideas are more widely, recognized as fairly normal. But back then, like, we would not go out until like 30 minutes before the game started. And that was like bizarre to people. Knowing now there was a method to his madness, and I agree more with how he was doing things than now than how, like, people have no idea just how much workload. You made a great comment that not many people think about. The sun may be going down or down by the time 7:30 hits, or 7, or whatever your kickoff time is in your state, but it wasn't down at 5:30. Sometimes that's the heat of the day in August, and you're putting the kid out there. And what you may not always recognize is, like, I don't think I'm putting a lot on them, but they're about to go play like one of their first football games of the season. So they're doing everything a little bit harder, right? Like the first game, we know this, right? Like the last practice before the first game, you got to like really get on the kids about their stretch lines and all that, because it gets a little like whatever. But that first game, they got that jersey on. Everything is to a T. The kid's locked in. He's focused. And he is burning through his workload. And he's playing some of these kids. If you're all jazzed up, like we tell our kids all the time, if you're real excited 30 minutes before a game, you are not kind of in the right mindset. You need to hold that back as long as you can. Because I swear there are kids who are mentally playing a full game of football before the ball even kicks, and they're playing half of a game physically before the ball even kicks. And especially in small areas where a kid is playing 100+ snaps and 80-degree weather and 100% humidity, you're really working against yourself. And no, that is one benefit of GPS, is you can look at, like, man, so this kid had whatever 450 player load that night on a catapult, but man, he had 150 of those before we even started the game. And so, yeah, no, that's some of those, in football, they talk about hidden yardage. Like that's some of that physical hidden yardage that people don't always think about or contribute in. But no, that's a huge part of things.
It took a while and maybe some maturity to kind of see it. And I was fortunate. I got to ride horses with Peter Campbell when he was still alive. And he would always say the best part of the horse is that first 15, 20 minutes. And I have to think athletes are probably somewhere in that same range. The best part of that athlete's going to be somewhere in that first half hour. So those pregame snaps are probably the best reps he's going to have, but yet, you see kids all the time, they just burn through all those. And then when they hit the game, what are you getting? Are you getting 75%? Are you getting 60%? Like you said, it depends on the mentality of the kid.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We've talked about all the data analysis you do. A lot of times you'll be the first guy to notice a deficiency. So understanding it, I guess really you're almost like an athletic economist. So you're looking at all of the data and you can see, hey, we're losing capital with this athlete. We're rising with this one. So understanding that data and making the adjustments. How far ahead do you need to be with a high school athlete?
I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because it's something that we were discussing in the office quite a bit lately. So the county I work in, I'm thrilled to work where I work. It's phenomenal. There are going to be, by the 2030 census, 1 million people that live in Gwinnett County. It's one of the top 10 largest school districts in the country. Because of that, with buses and traffic and everything that goes with it, our school day, like I'm contractually obligated to be at work in my room at 6:50. Our first class starts at 7:15. Our elementary schools start on the same kind of thing, but at 8 o'clock. And then our middle schools, they go from like 9 to 4. And so here's why I'm bringing this up. This time of year, and it's getting better every day that goes by, but a lot of our kids are sitting in math class and the sun is not up yet. Is that good for their dopamine? Absolutely not, right? It's also the dog days of the year, right? You're a long way away from that first game. You can't quite see the finish line yet, and you've been doing this for a long time, so that's dragging on the kid, right? But you also have some of the basic things going on. So it's not as warm, so you're not going to get the same outputs when you're sprinting, right? You like track times. I swear, like kids wouldn't even have to practice. As long as it gets warmer every meet, their times are going to get better. That's just the nature of the body getting warmed up and feeling more comfortable and getting more sun. And then you also factor into that we're very much right now focused in a hypertrophy phase of our off season. So I think I talked about 4 things there, right? So we're not getting the sun we want. We're dragging because it's that time of the year, and we're trying to get bigger, and we're really focused on hypertrophy. And so a kid isn't running as fast as he was in November, right? And in Georgia, we have really warm weather. Our Novembers are like the Septembers in the Midwest. And I kind of look at like today was a really good sprint day for us. And a lot of our kids are hitting or exceeding some of the things that they hit in the fall, especially our younger kids who are, starting to, it's a beautiful thing when a kid turns from 14 to 15, right? Magical things happen, and that makes us look like really good coaches. But for a lot of our older guys, we're just looking like, can I incrementally get the speed that we've built with this kid back? And maybe, come April Fool's Day, we're back where we were. And maybe by the time we hit spring practice in the beginning of May, we exceed where we were. So we're running our best entering spring ball, mid-April. Another thing too that's really messing with my data right now is our kids on the track team, right? They had today was the best day to run because of weather, but they had a track meet last night. And the kid's like, I didn't run very well at all today. And I said, how did you do last night in the meet? He goes, I PR'd. I go, yeah, your body is hungover. It has a CNS hangover. And the kid's like, what do you mean? I said, well, the best way I can explain the CNS to kids is the old spacebar tap game on the computer, right? How many times can you press a spacebar in 30 seconds? I said, if you do it once, you're going to do whatever. And then if you do it again, you're going to get better. And then eventually you're going to hit your peak, and then you're going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. Come back and try it tomorrow, and you can't do it barely at all. You're terrible because your CNS is shot. And I said, is what you were doing super muscular? And they're like, oh, no, it wasn't. I go, that thing is what we're talking about with the CNS. That if you want to talk about the electricity of the body or the twitch of the body, so much of that is built into that. And so with spring sports, and this is really going out to all of our coaches that are at schools where kids are playing 2, 3, 4 sports in a year. The stresses are so random in the spring, right? So I may have a track meet on a Wednesday, and then the next week I have a track meet on Saturday, or like with baseball players, with rainouts. Okay, this week we played one game or no games, but then because that rained out, we're playing 3 games next week. Football has such a harmony to it, right? Your practice week is the same, your game time is the same. That does not exist in the spring. So to answer what you were saying, is a kid really slower now than he was, or if I could, let him sleep in an extra 2 hours and wait till it gets to 60 degrees in the afternoon and run him, would he run just as good as he did in November? Those are some of the things that I kind of have to. There are these the variables that are in the data right now that are like what's the term, radicals, free radicals, things in the data that are hard to quantify, but you recognize they're there because we're not collectively as fast as we were 4 months ago.
Now I got a chance to talk to Jared Bidney last week, and he's down there in Georgia, kind of where you are, and he works with quite a few athletes. And he brought something up, and the data you collect, you would know also one way or the other. But you were talking about track athletes running the 100, running the 200. You also, I've heard you talk about taking times at combines for 40s. Do you see a drop in 40 times from your 100-yard and 200-yard kids during track season?
Do I see it as in they get worse or they get better?
As their 40 gets slower, yeah, they might be fast in the 100, but their 40 gets slower. He was kind of going down the road of track season ends in May. You've got a D1 prospect. He's got to go run a 40 at a combine. Well, now his 40's slower because he's been running hundreds. I didn't know what you saw there.
Okay. I think there's a little something to that, but I will also say too that a state track meet, like in Georgia, you're having to run, like if you're a really good athlete, the amount of high speed races that you're running each time that gun goes off to either qualify for a final or to win a state championship, that is maybe the greatest CNS killer of anything. And I think a lot of kids need a week off. We have this thing in Georgia called a dead week, which is that there's 2 dead weeks in the summer. So the Memorial Day week, we're not allowed to see our athletes, work with our athletes, and then the 4th of July week, we're not allowed to see them or work with our athletes. And we tell our kids, we're going to work you hard. So make sure that when their breaks are built in, you take those breaks. Like if we just had a 5-day break last week, we told the kids, if you don't feel better coming back from the break because you spent all the time with some trainer and whatever, like you're not doing it right. There is no growth without recovery. Now, do I think that a kid could run, like if they're really working on stretching out acceleration to be the best 100 runner they could be, if they bring that same thing over with them to the 40, could it slow them down a little bit? Maybe. But what I've also found too with like novice kids is if they're improving their acceleration in track, like if the track times are getting better, why are they getting better? And a lot of times they're getting better at block clearance. They're getting better in the first 20 meters, right? Or they're getting, like to me, a lot of times with track, they're getting better in the first 20 meters and the last 20 meters, right? They're getting better at accelerating and they're getting better at not fading at the end. No, I don't like, I think that could be true with a large data set, but what I'm saying is like individual kids, I think, you may have some kid pop off a number and that what I'm saying is that's probably true for some, not for others. And I would really have to really kind of look at that to tell. Now I will say this, we had a bunch of kids that got invited to the Under Armour combine, which is a pretty prestigious thing. It was last weekend. And it was during that 5-day break. And I told our kids, I said, it's on Sunday. Treat Saturday and Friday like you treat a Wednesday and Thursday of a game week. Because you're going to go get measured. They're going to measure your broad, your L drill, pro agility, and 40. I said, make sure you put yourself in the best position to go do that at your best to your best ability. That means don't go do the hardest workout you've done in your life on a Saturday with a trainer. If you want to do that earlier in the week, but don't treat that day as sacred. And if you do that, it's going to pay dividends.
I had a question and I lost the question. You ever have that happen to you?
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, and I'll add one more thing to what I was saying too. The other thing too is like a lot of times a kid like, okay, yeah, he went and ran a 40 like 2 weeks after he competed in track. Did he also start playing 7-on-7 with his school? And like, did he also have to go to basketball practice? And is he also playing summer baseball? Right. So like, if the kid lives in a silo and all he does is run track and then prepare for that 40, that would make sense. But there's, you know, I hate to say this, he just had a week off. Did he drink too much beer hanging out with his girlfriend at the lake? Like all those things go into the sauce when you talk about outputs. And so, like, yeah, just the kid didn't run a good 40 Memorial Day week. I think there's a lot of us that are our best Memorial Day week. So that's why it's a good vacation week. So, um, like I said, I think all those things kind of tie in.
and you touched on it there. You guys embrace the fact that your kids are going to go to combines. You do everything in your power to have them prepared. They know their metrics. So when they get there, they're not surprised by the outcomes.
Yes. I always tell our kids, I always want you to be shortest with me. I hope they measure you taller at the combine. I always want you to be slowest with me. I hope they measure you fast, right? Um, because having the most accurate data in house for us provides us with the best ability to identify deficiencies, right? Um, we're collecting and analyzing data for a much different reason than the combine company, right? And so, um, so I've said this for years and years and years. The worst thing I can do for a kid is tell them they're 4'6" and they run 4'8" every time they're at a camp. The best thing I can do is identify a kid as 4'8", look at his splits, identify where he's deficient, try to identify interventions to improve those deficiencies. And yeah, he never broke 4'7" with us, but he went to camp and he ran 4'5'9". Now, I'm not the guy who got hired to run the lasers. Whenever I get hired to run the lasers, the times usually aren't very good because we try to be as accurate as we can. Um, and that's a rabbit hole that if you want to go down it, we can go down it. But I think that's a dead horse that was been beaten long ago. So
The one question I did have about that, and I don't know. You've watched so many kids run and you've taken so many times at combines. When they walk up to the line, do you know about what you're going to see out of them just by the way they carry themselves, by the way they set up? Like you're like, oh, he's a 5'8" or he's a 4'8" kid, or oh man, this is going to be fast.
it's crazy the amount of kids who will pay money to go get timed in the 40 and have never been taught how to get into a 40 stance. They'll crouch the line. And like I tell people, the biggest thing you have to learn is shin angle, right? The angle of the front shin is going to project the body out. So if that shin angle, like if your front foot, you hear people crouch the line, get as far close to the line as you can. Well, if you do that, your shin angle is going to go straight up. And the first thing you're going to do is stand up. And you're just going to pray that you can get to some sort of top speed and hold on to it, right? So like some of the things that kids can find even on YouTube is just anatomically incorrect. And it's, our kids are trying to get so much information from so many different places. And our biggest thing is just try to provide them the best information they can. Um, frankly, like they're not as fast as they say they are. They're not. They're not as tall as they say they are. Um, my brother-in-law, he coached at Drake, and he always said, he goes, we always take off 2 inches and add 2/10. Like, so you might as well add 2 inches and subtract 2/10 because we're doing the math. He said, if you're honest about it, we're assuming you're not being honest. So then your kid's going to get a really bad evaluation. And I'm not saying to do that. And frankly, for us, like with our size evaluations, they don't end up being all that important because so many of the schools come in and see our kids in person. They stand up, shake their hands, size them up themselves. So, we don't get too deep in the weeds on some of that stuff. Um, but yeah, no, I will tell you that plenty of kids step up to that line and they don't run nearly as fast as they thought they would. And I could have told them that before they ran.
Well, and that's just kind of what I thought. I mean, you just learn to kind of read the situation you're in. And if you're in it a lot, you get good at reading it.
Yeah. Well, the thing too is like to run super fast times. Like, are there freakish anomalies where a kid's a super good accelerator with no top end? Sure. Or vice versa. But for the most part, like if a kid comes up to me and goes, I hit 19 miles an hour on max velocity, I go, okay, well, you're going to run about a 5.2 today. He goes, no, 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 I'm a 4.6. I go, like, that stopwatch your dad has, you know, the button must have gotten stuck on the start, like, you know, uh, we deal with a lot of that. And, um, it is what it is. Like it's such a messed up game. I will say, like, track times are great. I know there's been a lot of debate recently about um, is a bad is a high volume track program good for my kid, right? For their football development. Like that's a really good conversation for us to have in the coaching space, right? For sure. Um, But the one thing I can say for sure is that if you go put out a FAT track time that is blazing, no one can argue with you about it. Like if you go run 10.6, you're in the 98th percentile, 99th percentile, and no one can say anything about you're not fast, right? And we have so many kids that go out and they they run track no matter what state, what ethnicity, what school I've been at. Kids are rarely ever as fast as they think they are. And so, but no, having those verified track times are absolutely huge. Because you can hear like, okay, I have a verified time from combine or whatever it is, but what does that mean exactly? What did they use the time? What was the starting mechanism? How did that compare to the other people in the day? Like I've said this to people before, like they've asked, is this kid fast? And I said, well, I don't think you necessarily, when I say you, the person asking me the question, I don't know if you necessarily have a good enough knowledge of what fast is for me to have this conversation. I know that sounds condescending and I don't mean for it to be, but I said, what if I told you there was 75 kids today and he was the second fastest one there? And oh, okay. Well, in context, that sounds good. Okay, sure. Like, what did he run? He ran 4.72. Well, that's not very fast. Well, laser to laser, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. I said, you get a stopwatch out here, he would have been 4.5, and you would have said, oh, he's fast. So, yeah, it's a it's a blurry sliding scale, and dealing with it is most of my Twitter interactions with people. But yeah, so
You brought this up earlier, and I'd had this question in there to kind of come back around to, but you see it all the time. Athletes change, but people's minds don't change. They remember them in eighth grade being a stud on the junior high football field. And this even carries over to some coaches. They just remember what they saw in Little League, and now he's a junior and he's past peak, and you've got a freshman that was unathletic that now all of a sudden is catching him and passing him. So with all the metrics and data you take, does that help even that out and take away some of them preconceived notions that people may have? It's like, the data is telling you this kid is ready to go. The other kid has peaked.
yeah, I'll say two things about that. One is that every school I've been at, and I will not name names, every school that I've done max velocity testing, I've done it now at 3 different schools. Every school has had a kid who was their fastest kid, right? Because he won the field day race in third grade. And it's like the Jerry Seinfeld, like I choose not to run. Like I'm not going to put that title on to the test. And the first time like they're not the fastest kid anymore. And so that happens everywhere where people kind of they ride a moment, right? And moments don't win games, right? Consistency wins games. Consistency is going to earn you that scholarship. Consistency is going to put you in the positions you want to be in, not some moments you've had in the past. So that's a huge thing. The second thing that we look at is there's certain things that we like to track. Um, Certain things that we like to track where I can make a pretty good prediction on the growth of a kid. Um, One of the huge predictions, like one thing that we've really like, it's a hypothesis I feel really good about, but is this wacky new metric I came up with, which is wingspan divided by 4 plus foot size. And if I can get a kid whose number is bigger than 32, I and that kid is young and not yet tall, I think that kid has a really good growth potential because he's got a long wingspan, he's got big feet, he's just not tall yet. Um, Now it kind of falls apart like once the kid becomes like, we have a kid who's like 6'4" and he's got a huge number. Like, will he get to 6'6"? Maybe. Will he get to 6'7"? Like, him being the kid on the far end of the bell curve, right? But those kids kind of in that meaty part of the bell curve, we can really kind of estimate, okay, like um some kids, like, they'll be 5'11", but that number is 28. And and like, sorry, it's probably it for you. And then you look at their legs. Okay, you got hairy legs. Do you shave? Yeah, you shave. Yeah, this is probably it. Like, um, so we do that to just kind of track to make, like, have a good guesstimate on who could be tall that is not yet. Um, so yeah, that like I said, that's kind of the big one I've looked at recently. I've also toyed around with some other metrics, like we've been looking at hand size, and I think hand size is kind of wonky because hand size is about as much as the hand can stretch, as much as it is the size of the hand. So that's why I like foot size better, because you don't stretch your foot like you do, but you don't, like, you know what I mean? Like the distance between pinky and thumb of your hand, you can kind of manipulate, where the distance between heel and big toe is harder to stretch, right? So, but no, that's a big metric that we look at. Um, and we try to compile as much data as we can. Some of it ends up being useful, some of it ends up being useless. Uh, but just trying to have as many points of reference as we can, so we can be as creative with the data, and also, you know, kids appreciate it, parents appreciate it, college coaches appreciate it. Um, if we can tell a coach, he's like, he's he's only 6'1", but like, we know you'd like him to be 6'3", but he's 6'1", but he has the wingspan of somebody who's 6'7", right? Or he's got the biggest hands on our team. Like, I have a kid right now in mind that, like, he's one of our senior, or he's one of our rising seniors this year. If he was 6'3", 6'4", he'd be a no-brainer 5-star kid. But he's like 6'1", 6'2", but he's got long arms, he's got big hands, massive hands, big feet, really good in the weight room. And so, like, because of that, this kid has an opportunity to play bigger than he might be vertically, because not everything is heel to the crown of your head. Some things are, we play in a squat with our arms, and so sometimes there's more important things than just height.
To build something great or to maintain something great, a lot of people have to do a lot of work that never gets credit. And a lot of this data analysis and a lot of things you and the guys you work with do behind the scenes that nobody ever sees is an incredible workload. So managing that and your home life, I know, you're married, you got kids, you got everything going on. How do you manage your time where you still get the time you want to do what you want to do and manage a football team?
I will say my wife just turned around. She's sitting on the couch in the adjacent room, kind of raised her eyebrows. I think she's curious to hear this answer. I will say that I think I've done a better job at this job than I have maybe at previous places. Because one thing I've recognized is, like, I need to appreciate my time. I need to appreciate my time with my athletes. I need to appreciate my time with my family. I need to appreciate my time at home. And I'm not perfect, and I need to do better. And there's times in my life where I'm addicted to my phone, and I need to fix that. Um, but one thing I will say is that I found places where I'm better off just doing the data live than I am recording it and then re-recording it and then, right. So, like, what I mean by that is, when you come to our speed day at our school, I roll like a 2-tier rolly cart out onto the field. And I stand, like, if we're running a 10-yard fly from like the 20-yard, 30-yard, I stand at 25 yards and I have my laptop. And I'm literally calling the name of the next kid when the kid is currently in the middle of his fly. So when I tell you, like, I can get through 80 kids in about like 9-10 minutes, and they go and go and go. But what I do is I live time type in the numbers, and I have certain things built in where, like, all of our speeds are correlated with like our school colors. So, like, 19 is green and 20 is white and 21 is black. And it has to do with, like, we do the Tony Holler rapid wristbands, like, that's something our kids like, and it's just kind of a fun thing to celebrate our kids. But those colors, they pop up. So if a kid PRs, I can, like, I made it sound like it's just one kid after another. But if that number pops up, I can say, whoa, wait. Like, we had a kid today. I said, Bryson, ran 17 miles an hour today, and the whole team, like you get 70 kids cheer for him. And we say Bryson ran 13 miles an hour the first time I met him in March. And we've gotten him 4 miles an hour faster. He's also grown 4 inches. He's also the second youngest kid in this group. Um, he's got growth potential. He's getting faster. He's getting stronger. He's doing great things in the weight room. Like, that is so good for the culture of the team. So that's the reason I'm doing it. But also, I'm taking care of the data collection and the analysis kind of on the fly at practice. So I don't necessarily have to go home. And I know my wife has seen many times where I've brought, like, we had a time where I swear we had 30 clipboards at the house, because every night I would bring a clipboard home with the information from practice on the white sheet and record it, and then I just would forget to take the clipboard back to school. That's something that I've just recognized. Yeah, am I a nerd because I take my computer out on the field on a rolly cart? Like, yes, I am, but I'm comfortable with that. And I know that it's getting better data to my kids more immediately, and it's helping me get my work done in a more efficient manner.
I can relate somewhat to the clipboard. So I am a notebook junkie and I like good pens. And I have notebooks scattered everywhere that have, because I do a lot of research for the guests. At least I try to. So when I'm listening, like maybe with you and Ross Garner, I'm sitting there with a notebook and I'm writing down things that are interesting or that we could elaborate on more. Well, I've done enough guests now that I just have notebook stacked on notebook stacked on notebook. Or if a guest wrote a book, I'll try to read the book and then take notes from the book. So I have notebooks laying around like you have clipboards laying around, I guess.
Yeah.
Sure sign of a nerd, right? But
yes, sir.
You've mentioned your wife twice, and I picked it up in one of the podcasts you were on. She was at Montana State, so she was Bobcat up at Bozeman.
Yeah. And we are so her brother played at Montana State as well. And so we are a proud, I did not attend, but I visited a couple of times now. We're a proud Montana State family. And we have some choice foul words to say about the Grizzlies once a year. I hopefully that the word that came from my living room didn't slip through. That's a place that's near and dear to our heart. And, obviously, it's a place where she lived for a year, and having her as a resource. She works now as a life coach, and she can do a little bit of everything. She can help you kind of manage stresses in your life, help with nutrition, help with workouts, all the way to just somebody saying, I want to gain 5 pounds of mass in the weight room. Can you help me with that? She's kind of a one-stop shop for that. And her as a resource and just as a blessing in my life has been just so special. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for her guidance and her support. And not just as a supportive wife, but as somebody who has a voice in the industry and has an opinion on things. And she's told me things that I've done before is not the best idea, or, oh, that's new. I haven't thought of that. Or somebody that I can bounce ideas off of and have real meaningful conversations. Like I said, it's been a huge blessing in my life.
I didn't know much about Montana State and the rivalry, and we cowboyed up north of Great Falls. One ranch was up on the Bob outside of Shoto, and then the other ranch was down in Conrad. And the boss in Conrad was a big Montana State fan. So yeah, they took that stuff serious. But what I really remember standing out was it was cold, and I'm a Nebraska fan. It was cold. I went out, I got up early, I checked all my cows, I had everything done, come back in to watch Nebraska play Missouri. And at that time, Nebraska-Missouri was pretty good rivalry. They stopped the game midway. They didn't stop the game. They quit airing the game midway through the second quarter because Montana State were getting ready to play, and that game took precedence. So yeah, they just off the TV, and then Montana State played. So it's a big deal, and I think it might be one of the oldest rivalries out there now with the realignment of everything. Yeah,
and her having that experience and me being in Illinois State, I was a fan before I was ever coaching there. So I knew I was going to be an Illinois State Redbird since I was like 5 years old. So getting that job was a dream come true. Like, people don't necessarily understand like Midwestern FCS football, and I'm not calling Montana the Midwest, but as it stretches out into inland Big Sky country, these are not places that care at all about your 12-team playoff. They care about their rivalries. They care about their conference. They care about being the best team in their state, and they care about winning an FCS championship. And there's something so special and pure about that. And one thing great now with like ESPN Plus is we can just put the game on. It's easy. I down here in suburban Atlanta, we could just put any Montana State game that we want on the TV. And yeah, so her brother actually, he still lives out in Bozeman. So I will say this: we went out there. I think we've been out there 3 times now. We went to visit right when we kind of met that first summer. We went out for her brother's senior night, and then we went for a wedding a couple of years ago. When we went for the wedding, we went in July. We went to a rodeo where it was cold, and we on 4th of July we watched fireworks off the mountain, and it was really cold, like winter coat cold on the 4th of July. Now the days are beautiful in the summer, 75, and the cleanest air you've ever breathed in. But no, I am not a cold weather fan at all. I'm very soft when it comes to that. So yeah, we've talked about moving different places, and every time I like really think about it, I was like, I don't know if I could handle it. And my head is getting balder by the year, and so my natural insulation is dwindling.
I know we're a long ways from football, but that's okay. We can talk about some other stuff. There's a few things in there. So first of all, I remember the thing that caught me off guard was they started playing heat warnings at 85 degrees. So the radio would constantly remind you that it's hot, and every night would get down in the, mid 40s. So like you said, it'd get hot during the day and then it'd get cold at night. And I've managed to see snow every month of the year, but August being out there. And the thing about 4th of July is I will take the winter coat, because if not, the dang mosquitoes are so bad, you can't hardly enjoy sitting out there shooting off fireworks.
Yeah. Now I know my wife went out her brother's senior year, wanted to go to a couple games, and they went out when they played Idaho State, and it was in November. And I just remember talking to her after the game, and like, just like, that's a different cold than I've ever like guys were like frostbite, everything out. Like it was a special type of, like, I would have tapped out early. The liquid courage out there, I think, is an important factor for the fans. I think that's a big part of why they stick out the whole game. And some of those people are not wearing shirts and that. But yeah, I'm not cut from off. I wouldn't be able to hang.
Well, now that we'll maybe wrap up that tangent and a few more questions, and we'll have you on your way, because I appreciate all the time that you've taken with me. But a lot of schools don't maybe get to feel it the way you do, but they get a kid that gains a lot of attraction. Now that's a huge distraction for the whole team. They may only deal with one. You're dealing with, would you say 16 last year or more went D1 or whatever the number was?
Like we probably have about I don't know how many kids on our team right now hold a Division I scholarship of some sort, but I mean it's around 20, I would guess.
So you got to manage the distraction of all these coaches coming in, talking to different kids. This kid's going here, this kid's going there. I know it's the norm for you now, but if you could take anything back to the smaller school that you learned about managing that, how could you help somebody?
I would say the thing that makes that culture, like our culture, special at Grayson is our kids understand that our success will guarantee individual success, if that makes sense. You can't win a 7A, soon to be 6A, with the reclassification in Georgia. You can't win a 6A championship without talent, right? To win that means that those kids were special and were talented. And I've heard the coaches talk about there have been kids before that did not have opportunities or had maybe D3 or D2 stuff, and then they balled out the state championship game and earned a Division I scholarship at the 11th hour. Our kids understand that the success of us is going to help with the success of them, right? And I think that can be true. That mentality is one that schools would be better with, that, workplaces would be better with, that our country would be better with, that if we can collaborate and work together, we are, our success, um, is a net positive for everybody involved. And that would be I would say my big takeaway. And the thing, and I will be completely honest, I took the job because I wanted to work at that school, right? When they came calling, it was like, this is a no-brainer. I can't not take this job. I have been beyond impressed. Guys who you think would be prima donnas or whatever it might be, if they don't hang their stuff in their locker correctly, they're running. And the first time I saw a kid who was committed to an SEC school have to do running after practice because he didn't meet the standard of the program, and he yes sir, no sir through it and did it without complaint, I was like, I get it now. Like, this is special. They understand that. The other thing too is so many greats have come before them that can tell them. We had Isaiah Land, who is currently with the Colts. He was a skinny kid when he was at Grayson. He was there, graduated in 2018, 2019. He played long before I got there, but he came in and said, I didn't really start physically developing, gaining weight until I got to Florida A&M. And I learned those practice habits at Grayson. I learned those developmental. So you see guys that will go, FCS, HBCU, and parlay that into an NFL opportunity. So our kids understand that there's a great benefit on the back end of what we're pushing them to achieve, as individuals and as a whole. The thing that galvanizes people together is the work that they put in together, and that can be true whether your school has, you know, um, 300 kids or 3,000 kids.
All right, so I'll wrap up with this, and I've heard you talk about it a little bit, but I enjoy discussing this, so we'll see how it goes. But 5-3-1. I know you're a 5-3-1 guy. I am too. I got a chance to talk to Jim Windler, and man, that was just amazing. I was really nervous about it because I was like, I really like his stuff. I like listening to his podcast, but what if he's not the guy he appears to be?
Oh, I'd be such a fanboy if I had a chance to talk to Jim. That's awesome.
He is exactly like you would expect him to be. It was amazing. It was a wonderful time. I think we probably actually talked more off camera than we did on camera, but great guy, developed a wonderful program. How did you make 5-3-1 fit for what you needed to do when you started coaching the strength and conditioning programs?
Yeah, very simple story here. So I'm at Villa Grove, and I had a coach who left the program who was running our strength program, and I went to my brother-in-law, and we're sitting there at Thanksgiving, and I was like, I know what I want it to look like, but just the nitty-gritty of it. And he said, go read this book. And it's fortunate it was free PDF on Elite FTS, and I downloaded it and I read it. And the reason I really liked it is that, to me, 5-3-1 at its core blends in very well with Feed the Cats methodology. And what we were dealing with is I had like 4 sport athletes. Like, when you're at a school that small, I can't kill them in the weight room. Like, I can't be the reason that they're sore, so I had to find a way to create, low. That didn't mean we didn't get after it at certain times, but I wanted to find a way where we could do low volume in terms of reps, but I could still track and see development. And so that was really my introduction to it. I did it that for 2 years there, and then before I was at Grayson, I was at Jackson High School, and I was the strength coordinator there. But that was the first time I had been like the strength coordinator. And so we use kind of a bastardized version of it at times, where we would kind of crank the reps up a little bit during hypertrophy phases, and we would go to like 7-7+ and we'd add some things to it and kind of manipulate it. And I know Jim has always said, stick to the program. Unless you don't want to stick to the program, then do whatever you want. Just do with it what you want. So, um, no, I've had a lot of success with that. I will say that like we do more volume at Grayson than 531. But I would say that a lot of the 531 principles we still incorporate, and we still like that idea of like, okay, um, they hit one rep. What should they have hit? Well, they should have hit three. Okay, well, the kid did hit 3 reps. All right, so let's improve his max by 10 pounds instead of by 5, his training max. So we do a lot of those same principles. So that actually makes with Coach Hill's program makes me kind of feel right at home, because that undulating fluctuation. And kids go through all sorts of stuff, right? They gain weight, they lose weight, they like the biggest sport I've had that I think 531 has been a huge benefit is wrestling, because you'll have kids lose massive amounts of weight, and like their per pound strength sometimes even improves, but their just raw strength declines. And that fight, okay, it's a 3-3-3 plus day and they only hit 1 rep. All right. Well, they've also lost whatever it is, 9 pounds in the last month. They're not as big of a human as they used to be. And when that 9 pounds is on a kid who only weighs 130 pounds, that's a massive percentage that kid doesn't weigh anymore. And so those numbers and those ideas can really, like we started this conversation talking about being a nerd. I can be a nerd and I can take that information and adjust it on the fly as I need. And like I've been saying over and over, just try to do the best we can for our athletes in whatever situation that we're.
Coach Garner, he probably regrets giving me his phone number. We text back and forth, and I started bugging him last week about this, because I kind of asked him some questions about interviewing you. I know you guys are friends, so we kind of got into what you're talking about there. Is 531 is an ideology, not necessarily 531 rep sets the Jim Windler way, but as an ideology of how it all works out. And we got into some 531 sprinting stuff, and he likes 531 like we do, and he understood it, and he took it and kind of ran with it. And you can really come up with some cool stuff when you start applying that to about anything, jump, sprinting, whatever it is you want to do. So yeah, to get in that program, understand it, and then take it and plug it in where you need to. It's pretty versatile.
Absolutely. And I can't imagine not using that as some sort of backbone to anything I would do going forward if I was the primary programmer. It's just an easy way to help a kid see personal growth, to do long-term data tracking on a kid, and see, is my program really working? And it also was really helpful when a kid wasn't giving his all or was absent a lot. All right, well, you're not seeing the same progress. Like, this is the trajectory of our team is here, and you're flatlining because you're not putting in that work, and we have data to prove that. So, yeah, I started noticing so many similarities between 531 and Feed the Cats, as in, when the work's done, the work's done, and we don't need to belabor the point. Well, find out where you're at today, hit your auxiliaries as needed, make sure that you're covering your bases in terms of injury mitigation and hamstring health and speed development. And if you start there, and you sprinkle in a little like Chris Corfist ankle stuff, and I think I heard Rob Aziz say one time, if you train every kid like a triple jumper, you're going to end up with a pretty athletic group. I always kind of keep those are some huge names that exist in, voices that talk to me all the time in my head about kind of how to do things with our kids. And we do so much plyometric work, and I think that blends in really well with a lot of that ideology. So yeah, like I said, it's one of those things that, even if you're following the steps and rep scheme, the ideology trickles into everything, much in the same way that Feed the Cats has as well, for me personally.
I would agree with that 100%. It's like, once you kind of know what you want, then everything starts filling in those gaps, and you could take something like that and just recreate a whole team in a few years, because you know what you want now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Coach, I know you got other things to do tonight. I appreciate the time. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and then you've been on a few others, and they were all getting released at the same time. So I was like, maybe I'll hold off a little bit. But that you would take time out of your evening, come on the show, it means a lot. So I appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the conversation. Anytime you ever need anything, just let me know.